Hi all, welcome back to today's class. So last two classes, I think we've seen some questions, interview questions, which people can ask you during the interviews for ServiceNow System Administrator. We've covered good amount of questions already. We've covered some generic questions. We've covered some basic questions which are techno-functional in nature, and these are the questions which you will be able to answer only when you've worked on things, you have some experience on things, right? So that is what they actually test, whether you have certain idea in terms of the basic configuration, implementation of ServiceNow knowledge. We covered till question number 21 already. Today we will cover these ones. So let's start these questions. The next question says, what all do you need to consider while configuring notifications? Now, this is again a class that's taken quite in detail. Just to answer the question quickly, if I were to go back to the ServiceNow instance, if I were to show you that what are those notifications, right? So, for example, if I'm coming here, I'm going here, notification section. Let it open. So there were three things if you remember, right? The first thing was when to send. Second thing was whom to send. And third thing is what to send there. Right? Same thing here. Those four things you need to, three things you need to understand, right? First, of course, which table you want to send this notification to, what is the category for that notification, what is the application, which is the basic thing. Then the next thing which you'll have to understand is when to send this notification, which is what are those trigger points. For example, should be sent on record inserted or updated, should be sent on a situation where an event is fired, should be sent on trigger, right? You can define the conditions for that particular table. You've already selected. Right? When to send, then you have who will receive. This is where you define the users, the groups, the fields of the users groups in the assignment group, right? Whether it is subscribable or not. And then it has what it will contain, the template. If you want to use any template, it's already there in system. And then you can select the variables, you can select the entire HTML body. This is what you have to do. To answer this question at a very high level, you just need which table I have to send it to, which category should it be, what should be the name of this particular notification, when to send it, who will receive it, and what will it contain. These are the questions which you'll consider while configuring notifications on ServiceNow. Now, let's talk about the next question. This says, what kind of report layout options are available in ServiceNow? Of course, at a high level, we know that we have normal reporting as well as performance analytics reporting. This question is primarily in terms of the normal reporting, that what are those visualizations which we have for ServiceNow? We have seen it again, just a quick revision here, just to tell you what, so for example, if I were to do view run, I come here in the report section, then if you remember, we had a lot of options for a report, right? Just give you a quick answer there. So if I click on create a report, so this is what it actually happens when you actually do something on the system. You have done some practice. That is why they always recommend to have, experience on system before appearing the examination, because you might not remember everything, you can't by heart everything, right? So few things will come only from experience. You either do the experience in the real time or you learn it on a PDI, whatever the right way is, whatever you think is the. So these are the different report layout options. So you have bar, you have histogram, you have horizontal bar, you have Pareto, then you have pies and donuts, donut, pie, semi-donut. Then you have time series reports, right? Area report, column report, line report, spline report, step line. And all of them have their own use cases that we'll see when we talk about reporting section in detail. But right now, just to answer the question, this is what you have to answer. Bubble report, heat maps, you have multi-level pivot table, you have scores also, dial kind of a watch, single score, you have speedometer types things as well. There's some other as well, right? So these are box kind of charts. This is calendar, this is control, this is funnel. Then you have list view, you have map view, you have pivot table, you have pyramids, you have trend box. So Of course, there are so many, you can't remember all of them. So it is not expected that you have to answer all these points. So at a high level, what you can say that there are bar type of reports, there are pies and donuts, there are time series reports, there are multi-dimensional reports, there are scores, there are some other reports like funnels and graphs and maps, right? So this is good enough to give an answer in terms of the kind of report layouts available. Now, what gets applied where, that is a different kind of question, which is not a part of system interview question as of today. Right. So if I go back to the next question. This says, how can you check version and patch of ServiceNow environment you are using? So this is again a very quick one. This you must know. I mean, there is no reason you should not be doing this, right? You remember we had something called stats. We have read about it in our class as well. If I come to stats section, this is where I can find out that this is my version, and this is my instance name, and this is my patch number, right? So all of that you can find out, all of that information from here. Now, the next question says, how can you configure a field on a particular table or a particular form for that matter, right? So on a particular table, if you were to do it on a particular table, then what will you do? You will go to tables and column sections. For example, tables and columns. Tables and columns. So here you can find any field for that matter. And there are so many fields which are repeated across multiple tables, right? So you can always find it out. For example, if I were to show, I'm just selecting any table right now. You can see these fields in this table, and you can kind of go here and open this particular thing, for example. You see these are the elements, right? So from this is something more of a view which you see when you actually go to tables and columns. It is more about not the configuration part, it's more about looking at what is available. And you can also select something from here. You can available selected, you can also select from here, right? Now, if you are to do that actually, for example, if I were to go on incident form, and if I were to show you that how do you configure a field on incident form, then let's see how. I think we have talked about it already. It is not that we have not talked about it. It's just that we are refreshing few things based on the kind of questions we can get in the system. For example, this is the field I want to do, right? And I have done right click. This is the way you do it. So if you just have to configure label, you can use this. Just configure the styling part, you can do this. You can also see show CMDB, watch CMDB, CI. So this is more for troubleshooting purposes. Show is you can see what it looks like. Now, if you have to actually configure it, you have to change it, change the behavior. You have to go to configure display, right click, and then you can change the behavior of this field the way you want it to be. So you can see from here that it is a task table. So which means it is getting reflected in all the child tables for the task. It is a reference type field because it is referring to a field already, which is CMDB CI, right? Because on the incident form, it is acting as a reference field because there is already a field called or table called CMDB CI, and which we are referring here, right? Now, these are the reference specifications, choices specifications, dependent field, calculated value, default value. Even you can have, it is a reference value, that is why it is not showing you maybe choices to configure, but then if it is a choice type field, you can configure that choices as well from here, right? Now, if you see, this is what you get generally when you open any field: access controls, choices, attributes. So this is because this is a reference field, that is why I'm seeing those choices. Labels, there are labels here. The dictionary overrides, we talked about dictionary override also, that it is one of those features that can override the behavior of a field at a child table level, and you can still keep the same behavior at the parent level. So whatever the behavior is parent level, if you want to override the behavior at the child level, you can do that as well. So you can see there are some cases where it has been overridden also in multiple other tables, because this particular field is being used in multiple tables, and it has done some kind of override behavior also, right? So this is where you actually do the field configuration. On a form, go to field, right click, configure dictionary, and do the necessary changes, whatever is required. Now, the next question says, how do you import external data into ServiceNow? This was a detailed session which we had in terms of creating an import set, creating a transform map in ServiceNow, and then putting the data. So take the data from the external source using import set, put it in a staging table, do a transform map to the target table, and then based on the field mapping, data will be updated. Now, if you put a collace there, in that case, it will update the existing records based on that particular unique identifier, which you've used as a collace field. If not, then it will create a new record, as simple as that, right? So the concept of external data import is via import set and transform maps. And you can also, if you have kind of, and that is the best way. Let's not talk much about it because there are advanced things we don't want to discuss right now. Then the next one is, how do you migrate configurations and customizations from one instance to another instance? So you remember we've talked about update sets. That is the most logical way to do that. So whenever you make any changes in any of a lower environment, like dev environment, you should be first creating an update set where you are creating those changes and capturing those changes, right? So that when you migrate that update set from the lower environment to higher environment, all those configurations and customizations also get migrated from that particular instance to the target instance. You capture it via update set. Remember, we have seen this here. We had development. These are update sets, and these are things which can be put in the update set, like business rules, client script, field changes, forms and form sections, reports, definitions, tables. All of those things can be moved from update set. And we've seen the entire process. Remember, first we captured it in the local update set. Then we mark it complete. Remember, once it is marked complete, then you export into XML. You go to your target instance. There you go to retrieved update sets. When you go there, you import the XML there. Once the XML is imported, then you preview the update set. And if there are no errors found, you can commit it. If there are any errors while previewing it, then you have to resolve those errors before committing it. Once it is done, you can do a sanity check. So it also ensures that whatever changes you expected at the front end level are also done, and a tester can test those changes also. All right. Now the next one. What can you not migrate from one instance to another using update set? So everybody knows that you use update sets to migrate configurations and customizations from one instance to another. But if you remember, we talked about it in a class, there are some clear understanding, there are some clear elements which we know that cannot be migrated. And if I go back to the slide, all of these things, new data records, modified data records, tasks, modified CIs, new users and groups, schedules, scheduled jobs, dashboards, all of these things cannot be migrated from one instance to another instance using update set. You'll find other ways out. You have to kind of do import, export XML type of stuff. But by update set, you cannot actually migrate these things. Yeah. Now, the next question. What are the different integration options available in ServiceNow? We have talked about it. We've seen detail because I think in one of our classes, it was not so much in detail. I'll just give you a high level understanding of this answer. What are those different integration options available in ServiceNow? So let's go back to this particular slide. It says, let's go through it once. It says, ServiceNow integrates with many third-party applications and data sources, because that is one of its most powerful features. Because if you can't integrate with different third-party applications, then you will not be able to manage an end-to-end flow. Because for every single flow, whatever you have in system, you always have some precursors, you have some post activities also, which may not be necessarily done into ServiceNow. For example, your data set, user information, it will come from HR systems, right? Your asset management systems. You might have some procurement systems which might feed into asset management systems. You already have some tools for some servers, some databases. You want to feed that information back to ServiceNow using integrations, right? So, and for example, there is already an incident management system at the customer side. You want to integrate that with your own system. That is also integration. So there are so many use cases for integrations, and believe me, as of today, when you kind of evaluate any platform or tool, in terms of its scalability, in terms of its adaptability in terms of its usability, then integration is one of the very, very important, one of the most important, I would say, parameter to to kind of calculate or evaluate that, right? And as we just saw that there are a lot of integrations with CMDB, incident management process, problem management process. For example, if you have a team, development team who's working on some kind of Jira system, right, or something similar to that, and they are tracking their development tasks there. Generally, they don't have access to ServiceNow because they're not kind of fulfillers, they're not kind of IT support team. So we need to sync those tasks from at a problem management level also. Change management, they want to initiate a change from their own system and you want to integrate it here, right? As I talked about user administration, single sign-on is a very classic case. You always have it. I mean, I think most of the organizations will have single sign-on for logins on ServiceNow, and you do that LDAP integration, AD integration with that purpose, right? So the reason is that there are so many integrations available. Now, which techniques can be used? So you can use web services, you can use JDBC, you can use LDAP, Excel, CSV, email, and any other technologies which have SOAP, REST, REST APIs, you might have heard. This is most common method for integration, right? SOAP, WSDL. That also you can use, and you can also use API and command line integrations using a bit server. So there are a lot of technologies, techniques available in ServiceNow to do the integrations. Yeah. Now the next question comes that, okay, what are the different options if I want to use it? These are technologies, right? So first of all, either you can activate now. It is one of them. You can use a combination of them. You can use one of them. For example, there are already a lot of integrations provided by ServiceNow. You have a lot of integrations with your Google Maps, with your Horizon. You have something. So there are some in-house integrations that ServiceNow automatically provides without any charges that you can use. First of all, second, either you go to ServiceNow store and take a plugin, take a component from there and install it here. It might have some cost depending on the situation. So we can't talk about it. I think we're talking more in terms of technical stuff here, that where are those options from where I can do the integrations. ServiceNow store is one of them. Then there is something called share. From there also you can install an integration. It is again into ServiceNow. So see the URL here. Maybe you see this URL, it is developer.service.com, app.share. So there is something here. Store we talked about already. Then you can contact a sales representative. If you have any custom built integrations for yourself, you can ask them. And the last option is build your own custom integration using the platform's integration interface. And believe me, the last one is the most used one across multiple customers, because everything has a cost, right? So if they know that they can kind of do it at their own level, just writing some APIs, consuming some APIs, and they prefer to do that way, right? And it is nothing wrong with that. So this is where the platform integration interfaces just talked about here, they will be used to do your integrations. That is how you do ServiceNow integrations. Now, the next question is, what are the different types of mobile apps available in ServiceNow? So we have talked about it already yesterday also. When we talked about user interfaces, we have 3 mobile apps. One is a now mobile, which is for end users. They can raise their requests, they can approve things, they can see their tickets, where are they, right? There is one for now mobile agent, which is for the support team members who can work on the tickets on the fly. They can update tickets, they can do any task, throws any task on that particular app. And the third one is now mobile onboarding, which is specially built for the purpose of new employees onboarding, right? So these are 3 different types of mobile apps available. So there are multiple other options, like, you have classic mobile app. I think it's just being deprecated now after this now mobile thing. You have for every, for example, for Intune, you have an application separately. For VPN also you have separate. So for BlackBerry also you have different applications. So they have built for different interfaces, but the primary functionality is the same. There's just the connection method which kinds of changes in those cases, right? So conceptually, otherwise there are 3. So they have built different flavors of those 3 applications based on the interfaces, which is okay, but the functionality remains same, right? Then the next question is, what are the options to build custom application service now? So if you remember, we talked about it again. There were 3 options for custom applications. We have seen it here. You can use guided application creator for custom app development. You can use Studio, then build Studio. And the latest things in the market is like App Engine Studio, which is the most, I mean, this is quite latest in the market. So it is something which people can really use. It is quite having rich interfaces. Easy to configure things, quick kind of one single click deployments. So these are 3 different methods by which you can use a custom application development, right? So next question, if I talk about it, is what is the best practice to assign roles and permissions? So if you remember, we talked about it. I think we have covered in some slide earlier. Let's see that. So you kind of do a group level thing. Yeah. For example, you kind of define a parent group first. For example, you define an ideal group and you've given that ideal role to that particular group. Now, all the groups whoever are supposed to support, I mean, this is an example, right? It was not the standard practice. It is just to explain you at that point of time. So wherever you think the groups are for the support purposes, and all of those groups need idle access. So you should be creating those child groups under that parent group. So we're just trying to inherit the properties rather than redoing it multiple times. We're trying to use the concept of inheritance from parent to child. So if I create a group called parent group ITIL at ITIL group level, and I give ITIL role to that particular group, and I add any groups under that particular group, it will all of them will have ITIL role because they are part of that parent group. Now, whoever users you want to add in those groups which are created here will also have the same role. Again, the same concept of inheritance. This is the best practice in terms of giving the roles to the different team members. Yeah. Now, difference between imports and transform now. So we talked about it already when we said how do you import external data into ServiceNow. But if you remember, there was a so import set is that particular thing which you use while taking data from the external source and you keep it in staging table. This is where you use the imported concept. Now, when you put that data from staging table to target table in ServiceNow and you want to align the field mappings, for that purpose, you use transform map. So it is a combination of both import set and transformation map that we have to use to import data from any external sources. But then conceptually, there are 2 different things. They are used at different stages in the import process. First, you use import set and then you use transform map. Then the next question is, can you put collays on multiple value fields while importing data? So we have read the concept of it. Yes, we can put collays on single field, which can act as a unique identifier. But there are cases where, for example, if I'm importing data of computers and I have a collays only in the name field, right? But then I want that unless and until name, serial number, and IP address, these 3 things match, then only create a new record, otherwise update the existing record. So sometimes there are use cases where you have to put collays on multiple fields instead of unique field to maintain the data sanity. So because you know that these 2 fields will be unique and a combination of these 2 unique fields should be used while updating data, while importing data. So yes, you can do that. How will you make fields mandatory on list view? You can configure list controls. You have to use data policies, because if you remember, we talked about UI policies. UI policies work at a form level. So, but if you were to do a bulk update, a bulk closure, or you want to from the list view itself, then you need to ensure that all those fields which were actually mandatory on the form are also mandatory at a list view. You can do those data policies. You can use list controls and ACLs to configure those behaviors. So the point I'm going to make here is that the concept of making a field mandatory on a form or making a field mandatory on a list view while doing a bulk update is different in the backend. Okay. Now we'll talk about other questions in some more time. Yeah. Right. So as we discussed earlier, we'll have some advanced questions also. These questions, are for those people who have actually worked on those, first of all, ServiceNow itself, and they've actually worked on those advanced features within ServiceNow. For example, if somebody is working on a very basic thing and they're not working on the advanced things like automation integration, then you cannot ask these questions to them. However, I mean, as a part of ServiceNow CSA fundamentals, they should know the basics about it. That what is a flow designer, what are integrations in ServiceNow, how do you automate things, what are those non-mobile apps, what is PA, what is virtual agent, what is predictive intelligence, what are inbound actions. They should know all of that. But generally, people get to work on this in real life after a certain time period. Once they have understood the basic service, now they start working in that project, and then they want to make it a little more mature. That is where they go and do all these things. That is why I'm saying that this is advanced, which means, for example, as an interviewer or as an interview. So if I talk about as an interviewer, then also you have a very clear understanding. Okay, if somebody has worked on these items, then definitely he's a good fit. As an interviewer, he also knows that this is the scale on which I am being gauged. So if I am able to do these things also, which means I am in a well-placed situation as far as ServiceNow is concerned. So that is the whole objective of these questions, right? Now, we will not talk about what is automation, what is integration, what is flow designer, because we've talked about them already in the past. We'll just talk about at a very high level that, for example, first question is, do you have any experience in automation? So that's the kind of question people can ask. Answer is no. If you have done, again, I'm assuming that I have kind of experience in all of these things, right? So yes, I have experience in automating things. For example, I have a situation where I want to transform an alert into an incident, right? Or I am integrating with some third-party system and I'm creating an incident in ServiceNow automatically. So this automation I talk about, it is a combination sometimes of integration, sometimes of flow designer, sometimes so a lot of things. So automation is a bigger, wider terminology in itself, because automation simply means that whatever you have automated. So for example, using flow designers, using workflows, you can automate a lot of things like notifications, approvals, a lot of things, right? So those are also automations. Sometimes automations are end-to-end automations that I don't have to do anything from my side. I've just written some scripts in the background, and based on that, some things happen in the system, right? Now, to make that happen, you may want to write a scheduled job. You may want to write a flow in the flow designer. You may want to write a flow in the workflows. You may want to integrate it with third-party systems as an incoming or outgoing, whatever. So depending on the end-to-end flow, whatever you've done. So this is where you can understand the concept of automation. So whoever is answering, if he says yes, then you can deep dive based on these questions, based on his responses, right? But the point is, yeah, I'm trying to tell you the scope in terms of automations, right? Second question is about any experience in integrations. Now, we have just understood some time back in the previous question that what all kind of integration options available in ServiceNow. We've seen that, right? This is more about the real-time experience in integrations. So, for example, if somebody is doing integration, then what kind of things will he be interested in to do, right? For example, he needs to understand what is the source system, what is the target system, which means, are you having an inbound integration service now or outbound integration service now, or you're having a bidirectional, which means from both the sides, some communications are happening. Something happens here that also should update the second system. Something happens in the source system, also updates the destination system. That could be a bidirectional integration, right? So depending on the use cases you have, you might explain that part that, okay, this is how I have integrated. So at a very high level, what all things could you have considered? First of all, you should have considered that, okay, whether it will be, for example, if I go back to the PPT, which we just talked about, we just go to this integration, right? We need to understand, first of all, which module we are talking about here. Are we talking about incident, problem, change, user admin, single sign-on, CMDB, etc., right? Then you need to understand which technology we want to use. Will we be using web services? Will we JDBC, LDAP, Excel, CSV, email, REST, so whatever, right? Depending on that, you will ask other questions. For example, REST API, then you ask which REST API for which module, what is the authentication mechanism you use there, right? What is the, out of these options, which one you have applied? I'm talking about the last one here. whatever. So if you do something from here, they're quite simple, which means you just kind of plug and play with them. So for these cases, you don't need to actually do a lot of detailing. You don't need to do a lot of deep dive analysis because they're already there. You just need to use them. That's it. Reuse them. In the last case only, we talk more about integrations in terms of that what all things do we do there, right? So, for example, there is a third-party system for their integrations, and they have incident management there. They want to raise similar incident in ServiceNow. So that is an integration requirement wherein you'll have to attach your ServiceNow instance to their instance also, and based on certain conditions that, okay, whenever an incident is created in the source system, it should trigger a call to ServiceNow and create an incident and map those fields accordingly, whatever fields you've talked about. Now, it can be in any payload, right? You can have a payload, you can have a REST API integration, whatever. So whatever things you're consuming. These are just technologies in terms of how do you integrate, right? We're talking more in terms of at a very functional level that what will you consider? Then you consider that, for example, what is the frequency of that integration flow? Is it trigger based? Is it event based, right? Or is it kind of a scheduled one? But I run it always on the night, always during off peak time, right? Which will act as the golden system in this case, right? Which is the master source in this case. What is the frequency of the transactions between these two systems? Who are the end users? What is that end-to-end flow which you're trying to achieve? So before you actually start doing integration, you should be doing the deep dive analysis first, that why do we need to do integration in the first place? Is it something which cannot be achieved within ServiceNow ecosystem without integrating? If no, then yes, we will have to do it. So those kind of questions, then you can deep dive again, right? Because it is subjective. And the next one is any experience in Flow Designer, for example. Now, I think the people who are working on the recent releases of ServiceNow, like Paris, Quebec, Rome, San Diego, they should be working on Flow Designers if they're working at an admin level or as a developer level. And I think we have all seen the concept of Flow Designer already. You have a trigger, you have an action, you have the entire flow there. Now that action can be used even at integration hub level. If you remember, we had a lot of bespokes there, which we could talk to other systems like Microsoft SCCM, Active Directory. A lot of systems are already inbuilt. Those plugins are already inbuilt. Those bespokes are already inbuilt in the system. We're just triggering an action on those systems in that case. But the idea of Flow Designer is all about automating the entire end-to-end flow, whatever you want to achieve as a part of that particular objective. So Flow Designer and automations go, actually all of these things go hand in hand, right? So for example, I told you that automation you're doing, you might need to do integration, you might need to do use Flow Designer there. If you are doing Flow Designer, then generally you you use Flow Designer for automations only. You can also use Flow Designer for integration. So these things are correlated to each other, but the concept is different. I mean, you use them for everything has a different use case, but you can use them together. You can use two of them as well, depending on the use cases. Right? So somebody is telling me, I have experience in Flow Designer, then you can go ahead and ask, okay, then what are those options? Based on which triggers we can I would say, invoke triggers, right? Those application-based, record-based, schedule-based, all those things talked about. What kind of actions can we take? We can create an approval flow. We can send a notification. We can send, we can raise an incident, for example. We can raise a catalog item, for example. We can create something in a third-party system. So all of those can be done in the as a part of Flow Development. Now, when you say experience with now mobile apps, so it is we're talking more in terms of not as an end user, more as a system administrator, whether they know whether they've configured Now Mobile, those three apps which we talked about, like Now Mobile onboarding, Now Mobile agent, and Now Mobile. Do they have any experience with configuration of those apps? Right? If yes, then you can further deep dive into that area, because there are cases where you can configure those interfaces. Whenever you design any pages in ServiceNow or you design any module, they ask you specifically that, do you want it to be available to the mobile apps also? Because mobile apps, for example, incident view, if I talk about, right? Now on incident view, I may not want to see all those fields on the mobile view, which I see otherwise on my desktop or default view. Because at that time, my screen is bigger. I can go to columns to columns. But in case of mobile, I don't want to do a lot of scrolling from right to left, from up to down, right? So to have a kind of user experience, you kind of restrict some fields in now mobile app. And that is what you do as a part of the design. How will this form look like on mobile? How will this list view look like on mobile? What are those configurations I have to do? What are those menus I have to give to users? Should I give him approval rights? Should I give him task updation rights? All of those things, right? What are those minimum fields which are required you to take a decision to approve or reject something? So for example, there is a change record for approval. You want to show it on the mobile, but again, change record is so huge that you don't want to show everything on the mobile. So you just want to limit it to the main fields which any approver would want to see in terms of start time, what is the system used, what is that, have you done the risk management, do you have a backup plan? So all of those things they generally check before approving a change, right? So all those fields you can enable for them to be shown on the mobile. This is where you are configuring the mobile apps. Then performance analytics. Right. So this is a little advanced in terms of experience, because not everybody has experience with performance analytics. But yeah, it is definitely a powerful tool. If somebody knows about it, then he can actually tweak around, because this performance analytics thing, right, it comes with every single product separately. So which means you will have an incident management premium performance analytics. You'll have a change management premium performance analytics. You will have IT operations management CMDB performance analytics page. You'll have, so for all those kind of processes, we can have performance analytics dashboards. There are some out of the box. You might need to buy some of them because they are kind of paid subscriptions, or I mean, depending on the deal you have with ServiceNow, you can actually get it. But when somebody says I have experience with performance analytics, which means he knows in the back end that how to configure a performance analytic report or a widget or a dashboard. I mean, in terms of breakdown elements, in terms of scores, in terms of indicators, right? All of those things, he understands the concept. So you can deep dive into those concepts. If somebody tells you that, yeah, I have experience in performance analytics. And we've talked about the use cases already, that wherever you have some calculations in place, or wherever you're talking about some historical data to be captured at that point of time. Those are the use cases where we use generally performance analytics. And it is a little complex as compared to normal reporting. It is not that straightforward in terms of configuration. So if people know about it, then they know a good deal, to be honest, in ServiceNow. Virtual agent, again, a new thing and quite in demand in ServiceNow. So any new companies, they are going ahead with virtual agent. So some people have virtual agent Lite, which does not require licensing generally. Then you have the normal virtual agent. So depending on the experience, you can talk about it, that how do you configure virtual agent? What are those out of the box functionalities in virtual agent? If I were to change this particular menu, how would I do that? So those kind of questions can be asked later. But then again, we are not going into those details because those are advanced sessions, not covered as a part of CSA training. So only if somebody tells you that I have experience and you can understand the basics around it. Okay, yeah, okay, how does it work? Then I think you're good to go. You don't need to explain them the entire concept. How do you do that? If somebody knows it, it is definitely I would say star on his part, right? You can definitely give a pat on his back, and the candidate has more chances for selection in that case. Even predictive intelligence, quite a new feature. Not a lot of companies use it today, but it is something coming up quite well in terms of, for example, you have a subject line, similar subject line. For example, network interface failed, and might be in different wordings in different English sequence. But then your predictive intelligence, machine learning, that finds out all such cases where you have similar subject lines, right? And they kind of use NLP also, natural language protocol system, so which can enable them to understand whatever you're saying in terms of normal query. So the idea is that if somebody has an experience, again, this is advanced experience because not every CSA will know what is predictive intelligence. They'll know at a high level, but here we're not talking about high level. We're talking about the concept of predictive intelligence. We're not talking about the concept of flow design. Everybody has to know that concept as a part of CSA course. Here we're talking more in terms of the real life experiences. Then in that case, if you ask them how to configure predictive intelligence, they should be able to tell you that part. So that part we have not covered in CSA for any of these things. That how do you configure it in the backend? Because it is not a part of syllabus. But if you know it, then definitely you have higher chances there. The next one is how do you implement bulk closure of records with some mandatory fields? Again, the same thing. I think the similar thing we talked about when we said that how do we make fields mandatory on list view, because that is what you do. They are kind of similar things that if you want to implement bulk closure, you generally do it at a list level. You don't do it at a form level, right? And when you do it at list level, then you need to ensure that certain fields are mandatory even from that list kind of bulk update. On form, fields are mandatory, fair enough. Nobody can close the form unless he fills all those mandatory fields. But if you do it via list view, because you want to do a bulk action, then you need to write some data policies which ensure that from wherever the data is coming, bulk or form or whatever interface, it will make that field mandatory. It will not close that particular or not update that record in bulk if some mandatory field is missing. For example, you're kind of putting all 10 incidents on hold, or 5 out of 10 incidents on hold. And you're saying that, and as a part of concept, additional comments are mandatory whenever you're putting any incident on hold. So if you are doing it from the list view, then also state will not change unless and until additional comments are filled in. So that is how you configure the data policies and list controls. There are many ways to do it. I don't want to sound as a developer here, but I mean, these are some basic things which you can do there, right? How and when do you define inbound actions? So we talked about the use case already. So whenever you want to create any task in ServiceNow based on some feed from outside of general use cases, an email to a ServiceNow system where we all know that what fields can be mapped to a ticket, like caller can be mapped to the subject, sender of the email, subject line can be mapped to the subject line of the email, short description and description can be mapped to the main body of the email, open time can be mapped to the email receive time. So this is just one use case. Inbound, when I say inbound action, the whole concept is that you are getting something from outside world, and based on that feed received, you are creating an automated ticket. You can create an incident, you can create a problem, you can create a change, whatever you want to create under task table. Or any table format. Right now, I'm talking in that perspective. So if somebody has done it, they should be able to explain you that what was the flow they used. Okay, so we had an email, this email was sent to this particular mailbox. After that, we used to process that particular information. We used to create a ticket, filling all these fields and sending notification back to the end user. These are the kind of inbound actions they have defined. Now, the last question, which is generally not asked to a CSA because it is a high level question in terms of what all do you consider while upgrading service or instance. Now, for that, you need some experience, to be honest. It is not a very straightforward one. But there are some basic things which you can definitely talk about. For example, whenever you're planning to upgrade a service or instance, right, the first thing you should go through is the release notes. Is there anything which I should be aware of, right? Some kind of functionalities are changing, some enhancements are there which I want to do. That is first thing. Second thing, you should be sure about that if I do upgrade in my environment, it will not be a very disruptive upgrade because I have not done so many customizations. Because if I've done a lot of customizations, then upgrades might break things sometimes, right? So we have to be extra careful. That is why you always do that thing in your lower environment. You do it in a dev environment, for example. Before you do it in dev environment, you have to actually clone your production to dev environment so that you have talking at the same level of information, same level of data, right? So you kind of clone your pod to dev and you upgrade in dev. Then you do the entire testing cycle, right? Everybody is testing in dev. You have taken the sign off, then you've fixed everything, whatever was a bug in testing. Then you have sent it to UAT team, different UAT users who are doing user acceptance testing for you. Once they have done it, they're given a sign off. Then you are sure that now I can upgrade it in production. But before that, you need to ensure that all your documentations are also updated before the release, immediately after the release, so that if there is a change in system, change in behavior of functionality, it should be clearly documented. We should send clear communications out to the people. We should plan the change windows accordingly so that people are aware in advance of the downtimes. So all of these things, right, which I said at a high level, that release notes, planning your schedule in terms of dev, test, production environment, right? And then talking to your end users, taking the feedback, fixing all those test bugs, cloning prod to dev, right? Cloning prod to test if you want to, and then upgrading a production instance and ensuring that you have a backup on that day. You are making sure of all the communication. So all of those high level things go in that consideration while you upgrade ServiceNow instance. So this is the list of questions which I had to share with you. I hope it was useful for you. It provides you some insight. So it solved two purposes for us. One is the kind of questions which are being asked in interview. We have also talked about them, as well as we have refreshed some of your concepts which we discussed during our training. So I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you very much for your time. Thanks for watching.